Okay, good evening po sa inyo lahat at ito pong muli si SHAINE dito sa Usapang Kabayan at meron po muli tayong another guest, another presidential candidate guest and dito po sa ating programang Usapang Kabayan and bago po natin ito ipakilala, tayo po ay naka-live stream via StreamYard, okay, and simulcast po tayo through sa 7 po na digital partners po natin, which is the Philippine Event News TV, Global Pinas Online TV Channel 168, Blogspot of the Philippines, LinkedIn of Ness Aguilar, and my Facebook account, personal account with SHAINE. And of course, sa ating YouTube channel, the Philippine Event News TV, and Sobrang PH Channel 911. And bago po natin na i-start itong ating dialogue and open forum, ay papakilala ko muna po ang ating guest. Siya po ay former presidential spokesperson for PRRD and former DFA Undersecretary for Strategic Communications and Research, and of course, one of the presidential candidates. Ito po ay walang iba kundi si Mr. Ernesto Ernie Abella. And bago po pala namin ipakita yung video ni Sir Ernie Abella, ni Mr. Ernie Abella, is nagpapasalamat po akong muli sa lahat po ng mga nanonood po sa atin sa ngayon. And I hope sana po i-take note po natin yung, of course, yung tawag dito, lalo-lalo na sa pagpili po ng ating mga kandidato, dapat po palagi po tayong, kumbaga, isipin po natin yung kailang background, i-research po natin. Ito po, kaya po kami nagpapalabas po ng ganito is para mabigyan po kayo ng knowledge, okay, about their background sa lahat ng mga candidates po natin na tumatakbo. Maliban lang, even po dun sa mga, not only for the presidential candidates, but also sa mga vice presidential balls, senatorial balls, and of course, dun sa mga local politicians po natin, regional na tumatakbo po sa ngayon, i-check po natin ang kanilang bawat background para makapagpamili po tayo at makapag-vote po tayo ng tama. Okay? Kasi, kumbaga, 6 na taon po tayong sa national, 6 na taon po tayo na siyempre na sila ang maninilbihan po sa ating bansa. At doon naman po sa mga regional naman po is siyempre 3 taon. So, mas okay po sana na mabigyan po natin ng pansin or tuon or let's say, pag-aralan po natin yung mga background ng mga presidential, ng mga kandidato po natin. Not only for the presidential votes. Okay? So, hindi ko na po ito papatagalin and panoorin na po natin ang dialogue and open forum kay Mr. Ernesto Ernie Abella.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Chamber of Commerce of the Philippine Islands Dialogue and Open Forum on the Economic Compass Pillars 5 or ECOMP5. We'd like to request everyone to please rise for the singing of the National Anthem to be led by Ms. Arnie Lozada, Pinoy Dream Academy Season 2 Grand Champion. Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bughaw, may bulag ang tula at awit sa pagunayang minamahal. Ang kislat ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim. lupa ng araw ng luwalhati pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo, aming ligaya na pag may mga api ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo. Thank you very much, Ms. Laarni Lozada. Please remain standing for the invocation to be led by Attorney Ramon A. Pedrosa, Chairman Emeritus of the Chamber of Commerce of the Philippine Islands.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty God, we are gathered today in crisis after another, affecting the life of this nation. As we prepare our membership and the nation to face the challenges of the next general elections for the electoral years 2022 to 2028, we are met today with one of the national candidates to the presidency of this republic. Therefore, we beseech you, O Lord, in your great mercy, to direct our thoughts, our actions today with your holy inspiration, and carry them through with the assistance of your grace, so that every discussion today in this forum on the 5 economic compass pillars of the Chamber of Commerce of the Philippine Islands may always begin from you and through you be happily ended for your greater glory. This we ask through Jesus, your only Son, our brother and Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you to Attorney Pedrosa. Please be seated now. We now have the opening statement from the Chairman of the Chamber of Commerce of the Philippine Islands, Mr. Benito Enrique.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce of Philippine Islands, which is the provenance and oldest economic business institution with its origin founded in 1886, we welcome the presence of our special presidential guests, as well as everyone attending in person and virtually. The Chamber's Economic Compass Pillars 5, or ECOMP5, was began to be crafted 7 years ago in 2014, and will be the theme of a major conference in 2022. As a prelude to said conference, we have given advance copies of ECOMP5 to each of the presidential guests and invited them to individually present on different dates their responses and comments thereto in a hybrid dialogue and open forum. May we invite everyone to dwell on the contents of the Economic Compass Pillars 5 as we listen to and dialogue with our special presidential guests. It is hoped that ECOMP5 will help the country rebuild its glorious past, and that indeed history builds the future.
Thank you very much, Chairman Ricafort. Allow me now to introduce this afternoon's special guest. He's a graduate of pre-medicine from Ateneo de Davao and studied at the Graduate School of both English Communication Arts Department of the Ateneo de Manila, and he finished his master's in divinity at Silliman University, and then went on to earn his master in entrepreneurship and social development from the Asian Institute of Management. He was a junior copywriter and creative director 5 years later and taught at the Ateneo de Davao Humanities and Communication Arts Department. He's also a builder of institutions. He started and was pastor of a successful church for 18 years, founder and president of an innovative secondary school, founder and chair of a thriving credit cooperative, and he also sent missionaries to Southeast Asia and East Asia. He likes to learn from social media, vloggers, bloggers, young people, kids, and those who take the opposite view. He has a wife, Joy, who joins him today, and 2 kids who have birthed 6 healthy children with 1 on the way. He's also a father figure and a spiritual mentor and counselor to many ordinary men and women, along with many who have their own ministries. Mr. Ernie Abella was the first spokesperson of President Rodrigo Duterte, and after fulfilling his mandate at Malacanang, he moved to the Department of Foreign Affairs as Undersecretary for Strategic Communications, representing the Philippines internationally at various diplomatic, democratic, cultural, political, and religious fora, and in interagency and interbranch activities of government. He also served as officer in charge of the UNESCO National Commission, working closely with the Creative Bloc of Congress towards promoting Philippine creative cities and advancing UN peace efforts through educational, scientific, and cultural cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, the presidential candidate this afternoon who joins us is none other than former spokesperson and former DFA Undersecretary Ernesto Abella. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for joining us. Before we move on, we will ask Mr. Jose Luis Yulo Jr., President of the Chamber of Commerce of the Philippine Islands, to give us a brief overview and the mechanics of today's dialogue. Mr. Yulo?
Thank you very much, Priya. Just briefly, we would like to explain why the Chamber came up with the Economic Compass, Pillars 5. Why Economic Compass, Pillars 5, based on history, builds the future. The Chamber of Commerce of the Philippine Islands is the oldest business economic institution whose advocacies, programs, and projects from its founding in 1886 contributed to usher the country to become a leading economy in GDP per capita in the ASEAN and Asia in the 1960s. In the 1960s, in GDP per capita, the Philippines was second only to Singapore in the ASEAN and second to Japan in neighboring Asia. We were ahead of China, Taiwan, and South Korea. I hope the young ones take this to heart. Martial law imperatives made the Chamber take a back seat from 1977 until 2014, the year when the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, recognizing its status, bestowed markers to the Chamber in 3 languages, Spanish, English, and Filipino, the languages that span the Chamber's existence. Thus, the Chamber rekindled as the Providence Chamber of History with the theme, History Builds the Future. By the mid-1980s, the Philippines is slid down from 2nd to 5th position in the ASEAN, overtaken by Singapore, Brunei, Malaysia, and Thailand. By 2021, last year, the Philippines is slid down further from 5th to 7th position, this time overtaken by Singapore, Brunei, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam in ASEAN, and from being ahead to now being behind China, Taiwan, and South Korea. We say, shame on us. As a continuing guide, therefore, for the Chamber, the government, and country, all the Filipino people, to help rebuild its glorious past and navigate the future, the Chamber herein adopts as its work program advocacy for the coming years Economic Compass Pillars 5 or ECOMP5. The contents of ECOMP5 are obtained from the Chamber's having experienced and analyzed tribulations and prosperities worldwide, as well as the positive effects of its advocacies covering a history of 8 epochs since 1886. Take note that when the Philippines became one of the richest countries in Asia and ASEAN, it was because partly due to the advocacies and work program of the Chamber of Commerce of the Philippine Islands. We were the first to say, Philippines first, yours later. We beat President Donald Trump, which is America first. But we included yours later, meaning the foreigners, you come later after the Philippines. We began that decades ago. The idea has begun. So we are now rekindling from the past, and hopefully our presidentials and whoever wins will also advocate our economic compass, Pillars 5. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yulo. And so now we begin our dialogue on the economic compass pillars. And so I will be reading each pillar, and after each pillar, mentioning the compass and the missions that the Chamber of Commerce of the Philippine Islands advocates in order to achieve that goal. And I will ask former Undersecretary Abella to respond to each along the way. And at the end of each pillar, we will have questions from the floor and via Zoom. All right, so let us begin. The first pillar is the Filipino in education, and the compass is top of the world. The first mission to achieve this is best education, meaning every Filipino has access to the best education in academics, new technology, and other fields, including universal moral values, ethics, good manners, and right conduct, and must be correctly trilingual in Filipino, English, plus another dialect or language. Yusek Abella, your response to this, are you in agreement with this? And if so, do you have a particular action plan for education?
Right. I fully agree with that. First and foremost, I totally just have a buy-in with the vision of the chamber. You know, among other things, I believe in the call and destiny of the Filipino nation and the Filipino. And I believe that the major key, aside from having a just society, is having the right kind of education for the next generation. If there is a structural build right now, I fully endorse a build also of the next generation. Not just a structural building, but actually building on the human resources, and that would be the key, would be education. Having said that, we also have seen the fears, the basic concerns of the Filipinos, and we know where we are very strong in. We're very strong in creatives, but we also need now a new generation of scientifically minded young people. So we would emphasize the STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, but also we would like them not just to have a strong hard mind, but also a soft heart. So we'd like to combine that with the humanities and the study of values. Now, I just have a little bit of concern here, but we're not at odds. But I would suggest that from the very beginning, our students need to learn mastery. Mastery in the 3 R's, of course, reading, writing, and what they call arithmetic. But also, one of the reasons why our students find themselves to be bottom dwellers, especially in the exams, especially in worldwide exams, especially in regional exams, is because we seem to have a lack of critical thinking. We seem to lack the kind of capacity wherein our students are able to think things through, to think problems through. And I believe part of that is because the way we teach is we usually insist that they learn it, they have it in English or they have it in Filipino, when actually they grow up in the Visayas and Mindanao. So I would advocate the teaching of initial concepts in the mother tongue. I would, for example, if they're Cebuanos, if they're Visayans, of their, the major ones, that they learn the concepts first before they learn it, before they begin to learn it, let's say, in English or in Filipino. They need to have a grasp first of the basic fundamental ideas so that they can manage, and then they can go on and become innovative and creative after they have learned mastery.
Thank you very much, sir. So an Abella administration would have a very specific curriculum to be adapted in schools around the country.
I would emphasize STEM. We would emphasize that, and mastery, of course, and also humanities. There's an excellent school I've seen. I've been looking into. Two models actually. One is the German model where they stream, from grade 4, they stream from Realschules, Hauptschule, and Gymnasium, dividing it into tracks where people who are differently skilled can find the exact course or track that they can, and early enough. And of course, they can shift if they're late bloomers. But the other thing that I'd like to emphasize is there's a school that also emphasizes what they call the Great Books course, where they learn the values, where they learn the history, where they learn the literature of the great civilizations, so that they very early enough, they learn how to have a wider perspective, and they become less fundamentalist and wider, and having critical thinking. They know how to make decisions. They learn how to be personally responsible for their lives.
Thank you very much, sir. We move on now to the second mission, which is quality health. Every Filipino is taught nutrition and health care and has access to both lifetime, with focus on nutritious feeding from conception to 5 years of age to prevent stunted growth.
I so totally agree with that. In fact, I believe that every Filipino needs to have nutritional care provided by the government for its first 1,000 days, precisely to prevent stunting. Because if our children are stunted due to malnutrition, can you imagine the next generation of Filipinos? What would they be? What would they be like? How can they think critically? So you already to withhold nutrition for the first 1,000 days is to spell disaster for the Filipino people. Okay, Tagalogin ko, kailangan mapakain na ating kabataan para yumabong at matuto sila at maging mahusay at malusog ang kanilang hindi lang katawan kundi kanilang pag-iisip pati. The other thing, of course, is I would say the Filipino should also have a social safety net wherein the golden decade. Sabihin ko lang the golden decade. Pabor sa akin yun. Pabor sa mga seniors. The golden decade should be adequately prepared for. The seniors should not be scared about the future, should not be scared that they might not have any place to go to, that they might not have anything to eat, that they might not have anything no medicine to take care of them. But may our health system be wonderful bookends from the beginning towards the next transition.
Thank you very much, sir. Next is at least one excellence, which means every Filipino excels in at least one profession, skill, or talent, and has a minimum K-12 education, with college graduates comprising at least 30% of the population.
The numbers can go up and down, but definitely I would suggest that our Filipinos should learn critical thinking, should learn. And if there's anything at all that I would recommend that all Filipinos need to learn, especially if they go to school, aside from values, is they need to learn project management. Project management, they know how to, for example, even if they are given a task, they know that it doesn't just end there. You can see this sometimes when when you're riding down the road and suddenly there's a bump because the cement just ended there. No, we need to know that Our people need to learn systems thinking so that they know how to connect. They're not thinking just in silos, but they are able to connect in in systems. And that would be the key to our progress. Okay. Now, regarding that, skill and talent, yes. The other thing that I would recommend is conflict resolution. Dapat matuto tayo na i-manage yung ating personal inner life, yung ating personal egos, para mas bumaba yung ating mga conflicts, whether it be in relationships or in politika. Dapat medyo marunong tayong maging mahinahon at matuto tayong hindi lang makisama, kundi makipagsalamuha sa ibang tao na may iba-ibang pananaw at iba-ibang pag-iisip.
Thank you very much, sir. Next mission is patriotic yet global. Every Filipino must know Philippine history, love
Tama.
of country, and cherish Filipino culture
Tama,
while
tama.
respecting other
I
cultures.
just so agree with this. I just so agree with it. What are we doing here? We're just having agreement here. Anyway, the other thing, first and foremost, if there's anything I pray, I pray really, is that the Filipino, each and everyone, needs to learn, needs to come to a confident national identity. Wherein yung hindi yung pagpunta sa ibang bayan, assimilated na kaagad, na wala na yung pagka-Pilipino, parang tinalikuran ng bigla. Hindi. Kung saan ako natutuwa, Ria, Pia, dun sa, for example, in the Middle East, when you meet Filipinos there, you know what they call each other? Kabayan. They have such a kinship. Now, going back, it's very true. I totally agree. They need to learn the right history. They need to know what happened in 1898. They need to know that we won we won the revolution. They need to know that it was taken from our hands. They need to know these things. Wala na, of course, wala na samaan ng loob, pero at least alam natin kung ano yung talagang mga nangyari. They need to know that. They need to know 1946, 1986. They need all the way here. They need to know the evolution, our social evolution as a society. That is so key and so important.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, the last mission for the first pillar is citizenship duties knowledge, which means every Filipino knows the Constitution and basic laws needed for daily life, especially his responsibility in electing only capable, honest officials, the best and brightest, and to hold them periodically accountable.
Yes. Ang how do I put this? Electing only, I would suggest that early enough, there are 6,000 appointed positions every administration. But usually, hindi talaga napupuno yan. Hindi talaga na kompleto. I would suggest that a data bank be created to get in people, not to get in people, to be able to record the best and the brightest of of our young Filipinos, to know where they are, to know yung kanilang masundan sila, and then so that pwede natin ma-vet. Importante para sa akin na may tatlong classification yung dinadala sa gobyerno. Unang-una, dapat may integrity. Pangalawa, may intelligence. Pangatlo, may energy. Okay. Pwede naman kasi magkaroon ng intelligence and energy, pero kung walang integrity, ay baka masigasig ang pagnanakaw niyan. So importante yung importante po yung integrity at dapat properly vetted. Pero tama po, dapat po talagang makita natin, I would suggest early enough that people should actually apply. People should actually apply for the positions, and then we can have a data bank. We're actually thinking about it and preparing for that, so that we know na hindi lang tayo namimili ng mga kaibigan, because kung kaibigan lang, medyo manipis talaga yan, for all qualifications. Pero I'm willing, for example, to bring in people who are mostly career people, bring them up to become all the way assistant secretaries, undersecretaries to secretaries, to bring them up. And whatever, also to fill up the legislature, we need people who are highly capable. We're not saying exclusively, but we're saying we need people who are highly capable na meron din puso.
Thank you very much, sir. At this point, we open the floor for questions. Are there any questions from the live audience? None. And from Zoom, none. Yes, sorry, from the live audience. You have a question, ma'am? Kindly come to the microphone and please state name, affiliation, and question.
May hapon, ma'am.
R's. You mentioned about the 3 R's and critical thinking. So how would you reconcile it? Kasi basically, if you look at it, the 3 R's is not at all connected to the development of critical thinking. So how would you reconcile these two?
Well, they're not necessarily reconciling. It's a question of complementing, madam. I believe so, no? Kasi yung critical thinking is basically the capacity to be able to think things through and challenges. On the other hand, I would say, mastery is so essential so that people have the confidence to know that what they answer is right or wrong. So, by the way, history experience proves that it is possible. For example, my own grandchildren go to a school which emphasizes individualized learning, and they are taught mastery. They go through the mathematics, they go through additions until they're able to do it almost automatically. Now, when they're asked, they're also asked to defend to defend their position. So their capacity the confidence that they get because of their mastery of the subject teaches them how to answer clearly and logically. That is just part of it. You may have another perspective, but that is one perspective.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, ma'am. And now we move on to the second pillar, industries and businesses. And the compass for this is to be globally competitive. First mission, industries that connect our islands and industrialize the country. Filipino-owned or controlled companies are leaders in design, in software engineering, hardware manufacturing, as well as in the production of parts and final products and their operations of the following. That number one, connect our islands through short-haul seacraft, short-haul aircraft, ICT, and other new technology. And number two, other manufacturing industries required for basic self-reliance, security, and wealth are prioritized by making use of the country's being an archipelago to excel in sea-based manufacturing industries and of its other natural resources as inputs to manufacturing-based industries within the country. And lastly, the professions and service industries that complement industrialization are among the best.
All right. Thank you for this question. It's rather complex, but it's a very interesting way. And let me give you my perspective first. Part of our motivation, especially in developing our economic platform, is the fact that there are three things about our Philippine society today. Number one, there is a humongous gap between the rich and the poor. And let me just state, as we speak, there are 23 to 26 million people who are below poverty level. And more scary is the fact that there are about 12.5 million Filipinos who go to bed hungry every night. And these are the hidden millions. Why? Because if you stay in NCR or you stay in the Visayas, you don't see them. Because the 12.5 million Filipinos who go to bed hungry at night are in the rural areas. Having said that, we also know that we are extremely rich, natural resources, extremely rich in human resources, extremely rich in value, supposed to be. And yet, and of course, we also have about 10 billionaires in the Forbes rich list. We have about 400,000 who are rich. and yet we still have all these poor people. Also, we are also Transparency International calls us one of the most perceived as one of the most corrupt nations on earth. Having said that, also poverty, as can be shown by, for example, if you go to the works of Banerjee and Duflo, they will tell you that poverty or social inequality is not because of suerte. It is because of wrong policies. Having said that, here's what we'd like to do. We would like to turn agriculture, counterintuitively, we would like to turn agriculture into a mega industry. Palalakihin po natin ang agrikultura. Para po, unang-una, hopefully after 6 years, ay maiangat po natin yung ating 12.5 million Filipinos na wala nang gutom, ideal. Kung pwede, why not? Ambisyonin natin na wala nang gutom. Pwede naman siguro. Pwede. Nga, hindi naman siguro. Pero yun po talagang ang pinaplano natin. Pangalawa, kung pwede malesen, lumiit po yung gap. So kung tututukan lang po natin yung ating 12.5 million Filipinos na gutom, ay malaki na po ang ating mailulundag para matulungan sila. And that would mean creating, for example, creating an agricultural ecosystem na kung saan nakadikit ang edukasyon sa research and development. So marami tayong mga young people na yung nag-i-STEM ay kasama sila sa research and development ng mga seeds. Na tandaan natin, ang galing ng ating IRI, ha. So pwede po natin ituloy yon. At yung ating manufacturing, yung ating pagmamanufacture ng mga seeds, ng mga pampataba, at pwede maging mas mura yon. Pangalawa, also of course, tutulungan natin yung ating mga magsasaka na for example, maayos yung kanilang farm to market roads para lumiit din yung kasi yung nagiging mahal, for example, ng mga produkto ay dahilan sa ang tawag nito, dahil sa traders. Ngayon, sinasabi po, for example, meron yung tinatawag na yung mga agreements, yung mga economic agreements. Ang pananaw po natin, and we were talking about this earlier, Mr. Yulo, kailangan maproteksyonan natin ang mga Filipino industries. And we consider itong agricultural na pwede talaga ma-develop into a mega industry. Kasama na dyan yung post-harvest. Kaya masasagot itong short-haul seacraft, short-haul aircraft, ICT, and new technology. In fact, ang ating pong pananaw, while flagship po natin ang agrikultura, magiging backbone natin ang the digital economy, the digital industry, na kung saan pwedeng dumikit sa education, pwedeng dumikit sa maritime industries, kasi nga naman, para malalaman natin kung saan nga ba yung mga isda, at kung pwede, magkano ba yung mga presyo ngayon, mako-connect natin silang lahat. So, kumbaga, pwede po natin ipagdikit-dikit ito para magkaroon po tayo ng isang ecosystem na kung saan ay yung ating pong mga Filipino talent, Filipino resources, Filipino companies are protected. Ang ating pong plano ay tumaas po ang ating revenues from the rural areas, magkaroon ng poverty alleviation, maging sigurado po yung ating, ang tawag nito, yung ating makadevelop talaga tayo ng ating local agriculture, and also mapaigting po natin ang ating lokal na industriya. Yun po.
Thank you very much, sir. Next, we move on to Filipino-owned companies. Per constitutional and legal requirements, companies are truly Filipino-owned, especially those relating to national security and interests, and are competitively dominant in market share and revenues within the country. Economic nationalism is intrinsically essential for bilateralism and for globalization.
I agree. Kailangan talaga kailangan po maproteksyonan muna natin yung ating mga sariling industriya. Hanggat dumating na pwede po tayo maging actually na competitive. Like for example, meron po akong kausap minsan na ang tawag nito, na business consultant. Tapos sabi niya, masyadong protektado, let's say, agrikultura, yung rice, for example, sabi niya, dapat maging competitive sila. Sir, ma'am, Huwag po nating kalimutan na lagi na binabanggit Vietnam at Thailand. Those nations are fully subsidized. Fully subsidized. Tapos tayo privately, maliliit yung mga natin, hindi ba? Yung mga smallholders. So kailangan paigtingin din natin, tulungan natin, bigyan natin sila ng access to credit, bigyan natin sila ng access to mentoring, bigyan natin sila ng access, supportahan po natin, pagkaroon sila ng, so that economically they are able to stand on their two legs and they can walk before we allow them to compete. I mean, you don't become an Olympian overnight. It's a whole process. So there. So I agree. We need to paboran natin yung ating sariling mga tao hanggang marating natin na pwede tayong mag-compete.
All right. And in relation to this is the third, which is foreign-owned companies. Foreign ownership is most welcome, but must be dispersed strategically among different countries. The Constitution and relevant laws are adhered to, and national security and patrimony are safeguarded.
Tama, yung we welcome foreign ownership, pero in the beginning, tulad ngayon, kailangan po medyo calibrated. Hanggang sa we can, like I said earlier, so that we can become more competitive. So we welcome, we're not closed, but tama, may mga lugar na kung saan sila po pwede, may mga lugar naman na siguro atin muna.
All right. And next is brands Filipino-owned. Products and services conceptualized and or made by Filipinos, made by majority Filipino-owned companies, should have Filipino-owned branded names and trademarks, used and protected worldwide.
Supported dapat ng gobyerno yan. For example, meron tayong shipbuilding, magaling yung shipbuilding natin sa Cebu, sa Visayas, no? They're very kilala sila, and dapat matulungan natin sila para umusad. For example, pwede kasing tulungan natin ating mga farmers with locally produced fishing vessels. At saka yung ating desire na yung adhikain natin na magkaroon tayo ng konting shifts sa ating military, sa ating defense. Not so move away from land-based and more maritime, more naval-based. So that we can ang laki ho kaya ng ating coast. Yung coast natin, yung coastal regions natin, mas malaki kaysa Germany. So mas malaki tayo in that sense kasi ang dami-dami natin mga coastline. Pero hindi natin napapatrol yung ating mga borders dahilan sa kulang din tayo. So imbis na siguro, panayang bilhin natin sa labas, gawa tayo ng ating mga sarili mga maritime vessels. Pwede po yan. Kayang-kaya ng Pilipino, ang galing ng Pilipino.
Thank you very much, sir. Next, expanded Filipino equity and ownership. Majority of Filipinos own equity in companies that give them dividends and capital appreciation. Land is truly owned by Filipino citizens as per the Constitution, and ownership is spread out.
Yes, of course, no. Kaya lang ang ating mga Pilipino hindi pa masyado sanay mag-invest sa ating sariling sa ating mga hindi pa tayo masyadong sanay sa markets. Pero ang isang po diyan is mamaya pwede kong banggitin siguro yun. Pero yung isang kasi is kung pwede nga magkaroon tayo ng Mr. Yulo, yung sovereign wealth fund. And laki-laki ng natin, ang laki-laki ng ating mga yung ating mga mineral resources. Ang laki din actually ng cash reserves natin. Hindi naman wala tayong sovereign fund. Parang for example, apparently meron tayong ang isang hindi naman pero siguro isang challenge sa gobyerno yung ability to absorptive capacity. Meron sa nilalaki ng budget natin, minsan meron mga unspent, inaabot po ng 100 billion. So pwede pong ilagay sa sovereign wealth fund yan, pwedeng ilagay natin, pwedeng i-manage ng professional managers, at saka mangyari, pwedeng magamit in two ways yan. Unang-una, yung pwede siya magamit to create our social safety nets, yung ating mga PPP, yung conditional cash transfers, tsaka yung tulong sa mga abuli, yung mga ayuda, or kaya to be able to invest in local companies. We can do this. It's just a question of, it's a question of political will.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Are there any questions from Zoom? None from the floor? If not, we proceed to the third economic compass pillar, which is the government. And the compass is good governance with 12 traits. First, best of citizens are in government. The best qualified for positions are flushed out based on a standard template of qualifications that are verified for fair comparison among elected and appointed candidates. Regular performance accountability is also conducted.
Let me just take note first of the first sentence. The best qualified for positions are flushed out based on standard template of qualifications that are verified. You know, meron po tayong isang programa, our third pillar kasi is dapat matatag na bayan, meaning to say it's a resilient nation. And in our careful study, we have realized that the actual foundation of a resilient nation are the people themselves. It must be a people. It must be. We must have a generation who have confident national identity. And for this, we would like to challenge the next generation of Filipinos, including you.
Nasa next generation pa ako.
I-assume, let's assume. Kami na yung magiging mentor. May confidence ang ano eh. But anyway, having said that, we would like to we're proposing a national volunteer corps of between ages 18 to 35. Na kung saan kagagraduate na nila or maybe they've worked for 1 or 2 years, we would like to challenge our millennials, quote unquote, to be able to donate to donate 1 to 2 years of their lives. Parang ano sila, para silang Peace Corps sa kanilang sariling bayan. Ito yung sinasabi ko kanina, to teach mastery, tinanong ni Madam kanina, na kung pwede silang magtuturo ng mga primary and secondary students, na kung saan para meron tayong kuya ate program, na kung saan yung kanilang para masali sila, dapat makita natin yung kanilang skills, yung different skills nila, especially academic skills, at masali po sila. Doon pa lang nasasala na natin. Ito na yung merong, kumbaga, yung qualifications, we can verify. Kasi, kunyari, nakatapos sila ng 2 years. I mean, 2 years is a pretty good indicator, would be enough time to give enough indication about your character. So, na pwedeng sabihin, ito pang gobyerno, ito pwede pang legislatura, pwede sa executive, pwede sa komersyo, pwede sa ganito. So I would suggest, yes, I agree with this, that the best and the brightest should be there, the most qualified, but we have a process wherein we could possibly identify these candidates. Hindi yung hula-hula lang.
All right. Thank you, sir. Next, natural resources are used for local-based factories to create jobs and higher levels of productive capability. Natural resources must be used first and foremost as inputs to value-added manufacturing of end products within the country. Mining or harvesting of minerals and other natural resources purely for exports must be restricted to encourage local manufacturing.
You know, the last sentence, mining or harvesting of minerals and other natural resources purely for export must be restricted to encourage local manufacturing. Otherwise, I agree with that, because otherwise it's just extracting. Walang value added, walang dagdag. Parang kinukuha lang sa atin, magkano lang natatanggap natin doon? Siguro, ang binibigay ng miners would be about like 4%. You know, it used to be 2, I think, to 4%. I may be wrong, sir. But I think that I believe that's about 4%. Paano naman, paano naman? Pero kasi pwedeng, dapat tapos yung maiiwan pa yung Ganun na nga kaliit, pero ang iiwan pa natin doon yung yung masisira yung yung creation, masisira yung environment. So talagang dapat tingnan talaga natin yan, ma-revise talaga natin yan, ma-review at talagang kasi non-renewable yan eh. Non-renewable yung resources na yan. So, ang isa po talaga, tapos siyempre, hindi natin alam kung paano siya magagamit. So, dito po rin mangyayari kasi, ang pwede mangyari kasi, dito rin natin kukunin yung ating resources, a major source for our sovereign wealth fund. Na kung pwede, yung mga kita natin dito can be channeled into the sovereign wealth fund that will be invested properly, that we can use for social safety nets and the building of industries.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Yulo, would you like to speak
I
to?
guess I just want to double emphasize. Looks like Presidential Abella is already a member of the Chamber of Commerce. The point of using raw materials as inputs to local industries, I think, is very critical. No, and sad to say, our politicians do not want to go that direction because of corruption. No? You heard of rare metals?
Yes.
Those are molybdenum, all these metals. They're the ones used in your mobile phone, in going to space. One country that has a lot of that is China. And China, many years ago, told the world, unless you put up a factory in China, I will stop exporting my rare metals. So they force everybody to set up plants in China. Why don't we do the same thing? You want my nickel? What factory will you build? What end product will you manufacture? And you get only the amount of minerals enough to feed your factory. Okay. Instead, we just make Filipinos strike the stone and then export it to other countries. And then we buy the finished product at a very high price. So the other country gets a skill, gets the employment, gets the technology, and we get nothing. And then we have to spend more money to buy the finished product. How stupid, no? It's glaring, and that will industrialize the country very quickly, and it will preserve our natural resources because you will not mine it as fast as you can to deplete it while your permit is still there. That's what's happening now, So it's I don't know, it's mind-boggling how stupid we are. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We move on now to the third mission, protector of country, citizens, territory, and patrimony. All branches of government with the military are protectors of the Filipino people, the archipelagic territory, and patrimony of the nations. Laws are clear and are dispensed fairly in a timely manner.
This has to do also with foreign policy. And where I stand is that the Philippines needs to maintain an independent foreign policy. That we engage with powers, we engage with regions. For example, we can have strategic cooperation with certain countries. For example, let me just take the case. Let's say Vietnam. Vietnam has also has claiming rights in the South China Sea, but we can have a strategic cooperative agreement with them, so that if our interests do not overlap, we can continue to have a pleasant, harmonious relationship with them. On the other hand, we can also have we can coexist, let's say, with the greater powers who have interests in the region, we can continue to maintain. We need to be able to maintain an independent foreign policy while without losing sight of the purpose of being a nation. What is the purpose of a nation? The purpose of a nation is, number one, to survive, second, to thrive. So we need to be able to exercise our sovereignty in the sense that we, even if we are not yet economically that powerful or militarily that powerful, we need to be able to maintain our integrity both inwardly and territorially. So, there.
Thank you, sir. Next, front office services 5 stars, meaning the physical layout, facilities, and management of government front office services that are in direct contact with the people are rendered professionally with efficiency, honesty, and within time limits in a 5-star environment.
I have to give it to you, Yama. You actually put in there 5 stars. Para talagang talagang in-specify. Pero I would, yes, while I say that, 5-star, I mean, that's greatly to be appreciated. But I would emphasize efficiency, honesty, and within reasonable time limits. Singapore style. In Singapore, things work. And it may not always look 5-star, but the efficiency certainly makes up for a lot of things.
All right. Thank you, sir. And last, for the third pillar, the 12 traits of good governance. Based on the United Nations and aspirations of the citizens, the following traits of good governance are in place and in practice: citizens' participation, representation, and fair conduct of elections, rule of law, competence and capacity, ethical conduct, long-term orientation and sustainability, efficiency and effectiveness, openness and transparency, responsive and consensus-oriented, innovation and openness to change, sound financial management, accountability, and lastly, equitable and inclusive social cohesiveness.
I would like to point out just 2, because we certainly cannot cover everything, but number 1, citizens' participation. If there's anything at all that if there's anything at all that we want to emphasize here, is that the whole issue of reducing poverty and having, for example, and reducing poverty and making society more just and equitable is civil participation. I would suggest, one of the things we suggest is that we need to understand, for example, that the way things are run in the Philippines or in most countries, that there is a very strong the government sets policies and big business participates. Now, if the conversation is just between the two, if you have conversation only between government and big business, naturally it will tilt more to favor those big business. So we need to be able to balance things up by the participation of civil society. How does civil society participate? And I don't mean just NGOs or what, but ordinary citizens. How do they participate? On the local level. The local government code emphasizes that at least 25% of the 25% of those who are engaged in running the local government should come from the local community. Number 1, it's law enforcement or lawmaking or looking after bids and awards or looking after education or looking after health. Dapat ay nanggagaling sa ordinaryong mamamayan. Alam ko na madugo itong trabaho ito. Kasi una-una, minsan may resistance galing sa lokal na sanggunian. At siyempre, minsan siguro, feeling ng mga mamamayan, hindi naman kami pansin dyan. Pero dito po pumapasok ang ating personal responsibility. Dapat po, dito po pumapasok ang ating pagmamahal sa bayan. Kasi po, hindi naman natin pwedeng sabihin, bahala na kayo dyan sa buhay nyo. O kaya ganyan talaga kayo. No, no, no. Otherwise, we will end up sitting on a social volcano na kung saan maraming umaangal, maraming galit. We need to be able to address it early enough. We need to be able to address it through the participation of our local citizens. Hindi po pwedeng ilagay lahat sa balikat ng presidente o ng kanyang mga opisyales. Kailangan po ang pagbubuo po ng isang bayan ay kailangan ng partisipasyon ng ating buong mamamayan at pwede po natin gawin yan. So yun po, it should cover both 1 and 12 and things in between.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Are there any questions for the third pillar? Yes, ma'am.
Sir, how can
Ano po?
conduct?
Ay, precisely po siguro yung kasasabi ko lang na dapat po sumali ang ordinaryong mamamayan sa ating, for example, civil society. Depende po kasi kung ano yung sinasabi yung ethical conduct, ethical conduct sa gobyerno o ethical conduct ng ating mga ordinaryong mamamayan. Pero since gobyerno pinag-uusapan po natin dito, kung pwede po talaga sumali ang civil society, people like you, ma'am, people like you joining, let's say, a local government or a barangay meeting in order to be able to address yung mga issues, yung mga unethical issues. For example, itong proyekto na ito, for example, sakto ba yan na naggumasa tayo ng 300,000 para sa mga ilaw sa daan, siguro tuwing Pasko, yung gano'n. So tingnan po natin kung talagang makatarungan ba yan. Makatarungan. Kadalasan po kasi ethical issues are basically habits, hindi ba? Mga basically habits yan. Hindi lang naman internal issue yan, it's also habits. For example, saan natin ginagasto ang pera? Ang laki kaya ng pera ngayon sa barangay, sa local government. Ang laki. So tingnan natin kung saan pumupunta yan. I believe in subsidiarity. Subsidiarity is bringing down to the lowermost level yung mga solusyon para sa mga lokal na mga problema. So dapat pumantabayanan yan with people like you, madam. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to the fourth economic compass pillar, infrastructure and environment. The compass being heaven on earth. So number 1, the first mission.
Just a brief comment. When we were discussing this, we noticed that before, in the 1960s, the Philippines was called Pearl of the Orient. Ngayon, Sikman of Asia. Gusto namin heaven on earth.
Very enthusiastic response for the fourth pillar. So let's go over the first mission under this fourth pillar, God-given attractions, meaning natural geographic attractions that are unique to the Philippines are identified and their uses are controlled and subjected to carrying capacity limits with no-build zones, with carrying capacity limits at any time for residents, for workers, and for tourist visitors. God-given attractions should not be diluted by man-made attractions unless they are for accessibility and safety that protects and preserves the natural attraction.
Uh, ano ito eh, no argument eh. No argument ito about the Philippines, Unang-una, some of the best islands in the world are in the Philippines. The best beaches in the world are in the Philippines. Di ba, lagi sinasabi ng ano yan, Condé Nast Magazine, yung ganon. So, no contest. Kaya lang, katulad nung nakita natin, recently, nung sinat down yung Boracay, rather recently, kasi parang hindi tayo marunong mag-alaga ng ating sariling gamit. So kailangan maituro uli yung good manners and right conduct siguro. yung kailangan ituro, eto basurahan yan ha, diyan mo ilalagay yung dumi ha. So kumbaga ituro natin yung mga habits uli. Again, I agree, yung pong pagtuturo ng ganyan ay threefold, no? Isa, yung pamilya, kaya yung spiritual community, at saka sa eskwelahan. Ang isa po siguro dapat maituro aside from this, yung mga while I'm here, dapat siguro maituro talaga yung sa mga bata uli. Ewan ko, I don't see it anymore. I don't know if maybe it's still there. Yung turuan ng mga traffic rules and regulations, yung alam nila yung saan tatawid, titingin. So isa yan. Isa pa siguro, ito, hindi naman talaga kasama rito, pero siguro dapat matuto ang lahat ng Pilipino lumangoy. Natatakot mas natatakot sa tubig. So para magkaroon tayo ng deeper appreciation, I believe that our own youth needs to be exposed. I believe in summer camps. Ako po ay laking summer camp. Yung bang, you go for several days, ideally about a week, 2 weeks. Yung matuto kayo, meron kayong konting have fun, survival, and all that. But I believe there should be greater contact with nature. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Yulo would like to add to.
Just an addendum, no? The main point we are driving at here is carrying capacity limits. When President Duterte shut down Boracay, we were happy. We went to the Department of Tourism and we asked them, now that you have a chance, what are your carrying capacity limits for the beach of Boracay? They didn't know what to answer. So I said, can 1 million people fit? They didn't know what to answer. How many? What is the carrying capacity? If you have a passenger bus with 45 seats, your carrying capacity is 45. So what is the carrying capacity of the beach of Boracay? So in our discussion, finally they said, it's 1.3 kilometers long, X meters wide. So they were thinking about it. So I said, is it okay if people are on the beach 1 meter apart? They said, masyado yata malapit yan. And they agreed on a figure of one individual must have 30 square meters around him.
Whoa.
Like a room, like a bedroom. So that you see the sand and you have space.
Yeah.
Hindi pwedeng ganito kadikit, no? Meaning, so
space, yeah.
If the beach is X number square meters divided by 30, that is the number of people that should be allowed on the beach at any one time. Then you experience the beach. Okay? And this is an idea that I noticed in Croatia, beautiful country, Croatia. They have a wonderful beach falls. People have to park 30 minutes away in restaurants. And then the guide will pick you up, 25 people at a time. Walk 30 minutes to go to the falls. When you are at the falls, you do not see anybody. You see nature and the falls. Then after 30 minutes, you go back, the next batch comes in. That is the concept of carrying capacity limits. limits. Hindi pwede yung paramihan ng tao. So you have to enjoy what God gave you. This is what we're trying to say here. Carrying capacity limits. How many people should live there? How many people should work there? And how many people should visit? Bilangin. Hindi pwede walang bilang. Kung hindi, we will lose everything.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Now we move on to the next man-made infrastructure. Roads, bridges, and other infrastructure or structures must be world competitive, best in design, engineering, quality build, cost and time efficiency, with added disaster prevention measures against earthquakes and typhoons. Scientific basis is used to protect the natural habitat, with nature allowed to do its wonders.
Yeah, this thing would fit into what we would call a long-term vision. For example, there's a tendency for politicians to plan for the next 6 years. To plan for the next 6 years. So there's also a tendency to provide band-aid solutions. But let me put it this way. We have a vision for the Philippines, what we call Philippine Century or Siglo Filipino, in which we would like to be able to continue the good things that have been done in the past administration and continue in this administration and recommend that the next generation, the next administrations, 2 or 3 administrations down the line, so that would be what? 24. About 24 years down the line, if anything at all that we make or design should be able to carry the development during those next 24 years or next 50 years, all the way to ambition 2040 or even longer. So yes, I believe these things can be addressed and should be addressed and will be addressed if we have a longer term vision. If people are willing to work together in order to be able to extend, to be able to provide for the needs. Katulad na sinasabi ni Mr. Yulo, sabi niya, can you imagine, ano tawag nito, how many meters?
30.
30 meters per individual on the beach. 30. And natural, pang iba nag-iisip, parang lugi tayo dyan, bro. Kung pwede, dagdagan natin. No? But I understand, if we have a longer term vision, we don't have to we don't have to grab everything today. We can have more years, we can have more days, so these things, yes, but it depends also on vision. Man-made structure must take into consideration a long-term vision.
Thank you, sir. Next, islands constraints into advantages. The geographic uniqueness of the country, with earthquakes, typhoons, and many islands, are met heads-on as challenges to connect the islands by designing and building the best airports, seaports, ICT, and other new technologies, best roads, bridges, and other infrastructure that can withstand adverse effects of earthquakes and typhoons.
That is why I'm batting for a sovereign wealth fund, so we can actually pay for these structures. Of course, the airports and the seaports, it can be partnerships, for example, but in order to be able to build infrastructures that will last, that will truly last, it needs, well, we need the capital input, we'll need the resources for that, and for that we need actually to work on our economic platforms so that we can do all these things. These are great, these are beautiful, but we'll need, and of course, perspective. At the end of the day, sir, it's all about taste. you know, uh, so not just yung maganda, but dapat kaya at kayang tumagal.
All right, thank you, sir. Next, minimum space standards. The adage, a place for everything and everything in its place, is followed as it applies to spaces for work, play, living, and public use. Public vehicles load, unload not on the road, but on designated indented stations away from the road. And public vehicles are dispatched sequentially based on scheduled interval times with no overtaking allowed. Residences close to workplaces are provided to lessen traffic and time commutes.
This really assumes a highly disciplined citizenry. But on the other hand, of course, you cannot but agree. One of the, for example, I haven't been to Hong Kong for the recently, not in the recent past, but Hong Kong used to fascinate me because they had such tiny roads, and yet everybody was on time. People were orderly, but it demands not just the infrastructure that allows for example, indented stations, but also a disciplined citizenry. And for that, we need, I suppose, more than just the structure, but a way, for example, of daily the daily molding of mental habits in order to be able to live and participate harmoniously and take full advantage of these structures.
Thank you, sir. And now we move on to energy sources varied and safe. A mixed combination of energy sources from traditional to renewables to nuclear and other new technologies such as modular nuclear power plants can be adopted for as long as they are scientifically safe, clean, and cost efficient.
One of the things that we have that we're really seriously we're in conversation about is, for example, when we establish a prototype in Mindanao and for the agricultural powerhouse, one of the things we'd like to emphasize is renewable energy. For example, yung ang tawag nito, yung for example, establishing microgrids, no? So for barangays where they can have their own pwede silang magkaroon ng sarili nilang maliit na grid so that they can have light, they can have access to internet, they can study more, they can have more fellowship, the quality of life improves, and if there's extra, they can actually sell it. So yes, I'm rather very, very open, and in fact, hindi lang open, but seek to establish this kind of renewable energy. So dapat mapasukan natin.
Thank you very much, sir. Are there any questions via Zoom? We'll go to Mr. Yulo.
Yes.
Go ahead, sir. Is there a question from the floor? Yes, Matt.
Just a short comment on the nuclear. We put in here also modular nuclear because there are now nuclear plants that are small, so they are quite safe and they will not devastate a wide area. This chamber, we actually had been looking and studying the Bataan nuclear plant, and we are for its opening. We know there are many people against it, but we've studied it very well. Our plant in Bataan was done by Westinghouse, 660 megawatts, and there are two other similar plants made by Westinghouse. One is in South Korea, and the second is in Slovenia. Slovenia is a beautiful country in Europe that I had the privilege of serving as its honorary consul. They have been operating those plants for the last 40 years, accident-free. So why don't we just ask the Slovenians and the South Koreans, can you please come to Manila, train our people, help us run our plant? I mean, it's logical. No, it's not necessarily a bad thing. No, and we can come in with more safety mechanisms. And then there is now modular nuclear plants, small type. As we look for renewables, no, we're not saying go nuclear. We're saying go multi-source power so that we can develop knowledge in every one of them. Let us not shut our minds because, for example, Chernobyl had a problem, Japan had a problem, but they haven't shut down their nuclear plants. They learned from their mistakes and did it better. No, so it's just a question of how you manage things. So, I know that it's very controversial. Our former presidentials, two of them did not agree. So it was interesting.
Thank you very much, sir. We have a question from Mav Gonzalez of GMA7.
Hello. Hi, sir. Good afternoon po. Sir, you mentioned the Sovereign Wealth Fund a few times already. We were just wondering, should you assume the presidency, ano po yung nakikita ninyo that could be a great source seed fund nun? And how long would it take for the Philippines to have an actual viable Sovereign Wealth Fund? Thank you, sir.
May dalawang areas. How do I call you, Match?
Mav po.
Map, yeah. May dalawang source actually. For example, yung Malampaya, yung pwede manggaling doon. O kaya, meron din kasi tayo mga untap na mga, yung katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, no? Na meron talaga mga unused monies na inaabot halos mga 100 billion. 100 billion na pesos, no? Pwede kasi magamit yon. Pwede natin magamit at hindi lang kasi andyan siya eh. May nagsabi nga na actually ang ating reserve funds ng Bangko Sentral ay mas malaki pa sa reserve fund ng Canada. So meron talaga tayong pera, hindi na talaga natin nagagamit. So para tayong yung kwento na may isang pulubi na nakaupo sa isang kahon na naglilimos siya, yung nakaupo pala siya sa isang kahon ng pera ng ginto, no? So I think if we and I think there's a bill pending in the Senate regarding sovereign wealth fund. So unless there's anything drastically wrong with that, I believe we should be able to take advantage of it para ma-take advantage. Para pwede katulad ng 12.5 million Pilipino na gutom, ay baka matugunan yung kanila pangangailangan. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mav. Next, we move on now to our last pillar. Pillar number 5 is the economy. And the compass for this is diverse, self-reliant, and wealthy. Number 1, first mission, Filipinos in effective control. With a self-reliant economy that protects the lives, health, and patrimony of the people from globalization, supply chain disruptions, and from foreign control. The participation of foreign-owned controlled companies and foreign governments are dispersed for a global power balance and to avoid monopolistic control.
Sometimes foreign direct investments are almost regarded as magic bullets for the economy. Pero at the end of the day, tayo rin yung solusyon. Tayo rin na magiging solusyon ng ating ekonomiya. Na for example, katulad ng sinasabi natin agri-industry. Ang mga problema wala kasi one size fits all Pero nakikita natin, like for example, may nakausap ako na isang senior government official. Sabi ko, paano nangyari yun na umaangal yung mga magsasaka sa amin, sa akin na sabi niya, sir, farmer po ako pero mas ang mahal na ng ang mahal na ng pampataba, yung presyo na yung hindi kami makapagbenta ng mas mataas. So paano naman kami, you know? And somebody has mentioned that poverty is not a question of luck. Poverty is a question of bad policy, is the result of bad policy. So I believe, for example, ang una natin gagawin, for example, while it's true that, you know, to increase GDP is practically a holy grail in terms of wanting to maintain our credit worthiness, you know, it's important. It's also important that we need to face up to our moral responsibilities to our co-Filipinos. Na dapat, for example, yung 12.5 million na gutom ay dapat matugunan. On the meantime naman, hindi ibig sabihin na puro bigay na lang talaga tayo doon. No. Ibig sabihin na pag tinugunan natin yan, lilesen ang problema, and then masasagot natin ang una talaga ang bottom line. I have 4 bottom lines. Number 1, people. Number 2, planet. Number 3, profit. Number 4, purpose. Unang-una, why do we have government anyway? It's not just to keep, it's not just to maintain, for example, a government in you know, just to ad infinitum. No, government serves the people. The people are sovereign over government. Should be seen as something that really meets the needs of people. And hindi makatarungan kung ang mga may 12.5 million na gutom. Hindi natin pwede sabihin, kasi hindi pa dumarating ayuda sa kanila, pwede mag-antay lang sila. Pwede bang sabihin natin na ang gutom ay mag-antay lang, konting tiis lang, mawawala din yan? Hindi makatarungan yon. So, ang ating yung gobyerno natin, mailuklok, God willing, unang-una talaga ang kapakanan ng tao. Pangalawa, yung planeta, wag naman masisira. Hindi naman, you know, kadalasan kasi sasabihin natin, hindi kasi nakikita, hindi nakikita. Nakikita mo yan. Lalo na, kunyari, let's say, nandun ka sa, let's say, malapit ka sa isang mining na area. Hindi ka basta-basta makakakain ng isda dahil yung mga small miners, pag naglinis sila ng mga mineral, pupunta yung mga chemical doon sa tubig, tapos pupunta sa dagat, kakainin ng isda. Yung mga kinakain natin ng isda ay may mercury sa tiyan. You know, so dapat maantabayanan natin. Of course, we need revenue and of course, purpose. One of the things we must never give up on is the idea that of the Philippine nation. We need to maintain the integrity and the purpose of the Philippine nation. Not just because we're sentimental people. No, it's not about sentimentality. Maintaining the purpose of the Filipino, maintaining our purpose and picture and vision of the Philippines and the Filipino people is our way of survival. Otherwise, we become a failed state, or worse, we sit on a social volcano.
Right, thank you, sir. Next is natural resources fuel local manufacturing. With an economy that uses its natural resources as inputs to manufacturing within the country to produce value-added end products for its own consumption and for export.
Yeah, we give priority to, well, we will build up. I see our administration as doing foundational work. Let's say we're only going to be around for 6 years. So ang ano po natin dito, ang plano, ang ating pananaw is that ma-implement itong mga gusto natin, no? Na hindi lang siya hindi lang tayo maging source ng extractive economy. Hindi lang basta hindi lang ang comparative advantage natin, totoo natural resources natin, pero hindi naman tayo sige, kunin nyo na lahat yan, walang value added. Paano naman ang mga tao? Paano sila kikita? Paano? You know? So, importante yon na meron talagang value added, hindi lang extractive. Otherwise, talo po tayo.
Thank you, sir. Next, a diverse industrial agri-services and economy, self-sufficient in food and creating wealth from small, medium, large, and basic industries for final use or to feed the parts and component needs of other industries, including new technologies. Tourism and other services are top-notch alongside an industrialized and knowledge economy.
Meron po tayong at least, let me mention at least three yung comparative advantages, no? Ang comparative advantage natin is that we're really rich in resources and we're also really rich in human resources. Ngayon, yung pinag-usapan po natin na agricultural ecosystem, ang lagi natin sinasabi, unahin natin yung agri para mapakain yung mga tao. But on the other hand, nakadikit din yan, nakadikit siya sa digital economy. Yung digital economy, meron tayong comparative advantage yan. Why? Dahilan sa ang dami natin young people, ang gagaling. At hindi lang puro ano yan, hindi lang puro ano ba yon yung COD, COD o Mobile Legend, hindi lang naman gano'n. And magagaling, matatalino. At so, kumbaga, diyan pwede natin idikit yung ating human resource, idikit natin sa R&D, idikit natin sa tourism, idikit natin. So magkaroon ng, kasi for example, pag sinabi natin tourism, for example, one of the things we could really open up post-pandemic is tourism. But the other thing, idikit natin sa farm tourism. Yun na idikit natin kung saan pwedeng, hindi lang mga San Benito style, kundi talaga mga farm styles, no? Yung talagang medyo rustic at medyo enjoy. So, pwede pong ano yan, talagang, tama yun. Pero ang tinatawag natin is a diverse and agricultural ecosystem.
All right, thank you, sir. Fourth mission, an economy that promotes and rewards its citizens for innovation, excellence, and success, while nurturing and retraining those left behind to be competitive again or to find other areas of excellence.
I believe that na one of the things we can actually do is to allow for our people. Kasi ang bilis magbago ng mga trabaho, no? Ang bilis magbago ng mga nature ng trabaho. Like for example, who would have thought that we have gigs? I was talking with a young couple. The husband does online work. The wife also does online work. And suddenly they find that they're making a handsome amount of money, even if they're just very young. So ang puntos dito is, pero ang kawawa, yung mga medyo may edad, ano gagawin natin sa kanila? Hindi naman sila masyadong magaling dyan. But there are other ways of doing that. And I would say, retraining, tama yung retraining so that they can, kung di man competitive again, that they can find meaningful lives. Aside from just competing, meaning is very important. Yes.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. And now we go to the last mission of the last pillar, a wealthy economy, with a GDP per capita of at least top 50% of countries worldwide, poverty and unemployment rates both below 3% of the population.
While I believe wealth is not just measured by money, while I appreciate this, I would say wealth can also be measured by services. Like for example, dapat hindi na, kunyari lumalaki yung bata, hindi na siya isipin mag-aaral kaya ako dahil can my parents afford it? No, dapat makapag-aral siya. Makapag-aral siya ng quality education, hindi yung diyan ka na lang medyo bobo ka no. No. Dapat kung quality yung education niya all the way to graduate level. Dapat meron yan all the way to graduate level. Dapat and TY sa gobyerno TY. Pero hindi ibig sabihin dahil gobyerno ay ano lang yan yung No, no, no. So, so yan. So, uh, dapat provided yung education, provided yung, dapat another measure of wealth is that may edad na ako, natatakot na ako, baka iwanan ako ng mga anak ko, baka bigyan na lang nila ako ng isang, ng isang, ng isang lata, tapos sabihin, sige, magluto yan, ang gagamitin yung panluto mo. No, I mean, dapat ang gobyerno must be able, dapat panatag yung loob ng mga may edad na hindi sila ipapasantabi lang, that they can continue to lead dignified lives. Another measure of wealth would be a life of dignity. Aside from that, a life of meaning. I don't mean to say dapat philosophers tayo, pero yung kumbaga, yung people are able to engage in jobs that that are truly meaningful to them. For example, let's say somebody maybe is really a writer, but maybe an older person just yung nagaganchilyo lang. At dapat nakakapagganchilyo siya at maayos yung niya, ginaganchilyo niya, tapos nabibenta niya kung saan niya okay, napapamigay niya, nakapagbisita siya. I believe a wealthy society is a society where people know that they have a place and they are assured of their place, that they can come into this world peacefully and live peacefully.
Thank you very much, sir. So that brings us to the end of our economic compass pillars, and that was the last of the missions for the fifth pillar. We have a question via Zoom from Mr. Rafael Solis. So we turn the floor over to him. He is watching online. Okay, hi. Yes, go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon, President Abella. Thank you for gracing us, no? And I hope the chamber won't mind me asking this, as we keep on harping on this question because we feel strongly about this. We will be deciding based on this particular question. So previous administrations have come up with an economic legacy project, and the presidents are remembered for it, whether the people like it or not. These economic legacy projects address the need of the economy at a certain point in time. So for instance, former president implemented the roll-on, roll-off system, or RORO. So there. And for the for the current presidentiables that attended this forum, they mentioned the strengthening of cooperatives to promote and incentivize people, national industrialization in order for the people to have control of the economy. And I liked in particular, no, yung nabanggit ni Presidential Abella, yung four P's, yung people, planet, profit, and purpose for this particular pillar. Now, my question is, if we get to have an Abella administration, what will be your economic legacy project that encompasses all that you have mentioned earlier, so that you, in order for you to leave the people a legacy that will achieve an economy that is diverse, self-reliant, and wealthy. Yon, economic legacy project po. Thank you.
I would like to begin. I would like to answer that by going back to the beginning. I said there are 12.5 million Filipinos that go to bed hungry at night. Francis, no, that's your name? Rafael, I'm sorry. You look like a Francis. You know, ideally, after 6 years, wala nang gutom. O kaya lumiit yan. Man lang. Kung hindi man mawala lahat yan, 12.5, at least, patungo tayo ron. Para sa akin kasi, yung mga ibang bagay, mga industrialization, whatever, proseso lang yan eh. Ang kailangan makita natin, yung resulta, ano ba yung output ng gawa natin? So yung economic labors natin, kung ano man ang gagawin natin, man lang hindi yung nakapag-handbag ako ng maganda o nakapag bili ako ng panibagong cellphone na iPhone 100, you know, kundi na kung pwede, wala nang gutom. Isa pa, kung pwede, pag tinanong ko yung pag may tinanong tayong isang bata-bata, ano ikasisiya mo ngayong Pasko o ngayong birthday mo? Siguro kung nasa Manila, tatanungin mo, what would you like? What would make you happy for your birthday? Maybe somebody would say, oh, if I can have an iPhone 150. Pero kung tanungin mo yung nasa probinsya, ano yung ikasasaya mo, ikasisiya mo? Alam mo, pwedeng sagot sa iyo ganito no? Sana makauwi si nanay. Dahil ang tagal ko na siya hindi nakikita. Sana makauwi si tatay. Sana makauwi si kuya. Para makasalo naman kami kahit na minsan. Kahit na isang buwan lang makauwi man siya bago siya bumalik ulit. Para makapagpasalamat ako sa kanya dahil napag-aral niya ako. So kung pwede po, dito na lang tayo. Kung pwede, dito na lang. Kung pwede, kung man lang masimulan natin ang sagot na yon, okay na ako eh. Okay na. Pero kailangan sigurong para konting tulak para patungo tayo ron. Ganun lang, kapatid. Salamat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abella, and thank you to Rafael for his question. Mr. Yulo?
Can I also answer the question?
Yes.
I think ang tanong niya, ano yung economic legacy na iiwanan ng Abella administration? At pinagdadasalo namin sa Chamber of Commerce, sana po ang economic legacy niya ay yung Economic Compass Pillars 5.
Sobrang fans ko.
May copy na po tayong lahat, sir, no?
Walang sagot.
Wala pang sagot.
Okay, gusto
Sir,
mo sagot.
we're waiting daw for the answer po.
Sir, hindi ba obvious? Hindi ba obvious na mukha? Nagkatugma tayo ng ano. Iba-iba lang ang salita. Pero parehong pananaw. Parehong pananaw. Tao. Let me just end it this way. That at the end of our term, we will have been able to leave behind a nation that is worthy of Filipinos and Filipinos worthy of the nation. That after all is said and done, what we have, for example, in a sense, the economy, the infra, the government, the industry, after 6 years, ang ginawa natin ay nakapaglatag ng isang bayang makatarungan, mapayapa, at masaya. A nation that is righteous in its relationships, that will not tolerate 12.5 million hungry people. A nation that is peaceful, ideally they reject crime, corruption, illegal drugs. A nation that is happy, where the families don't leave one another or don't have to leave in order to put food on the table. A nation that is happy because they have jobs that are run by Filipinos, that they live in homes that have been designed by Filipinos. They have technology that has been done by Filipinos. I don't mean exclusively. That at the end of 6 years, they would feel, you know, I'm rather proud of being Filipino.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, former presidential spokesperson and former undersecretary Ernesto Abella. Thank you. Thank you also to everybody who joined us today. We'd like to request former Yusik Abella and Mr. Yulo to remain on the floor for a few photos.
Yeah.